Welcome back to the Absolute Auction Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Miner. And with me tonight is the usual crew back in the house. We got Adam. We got Mark. Mark is down there in the comedy hall. What's going on down there, bud?
I'm back. Yeah, I moved out and now I'm sleeping here. Actually, is what's happening. If anyone else has a room, that they're looking for a roommate, I'm here at the comedy club.
Hey, we'll get Matt Rife a call, see if he's willing to take in.
Here we go.
How's it going, Adam? Up here in my upper right.
Yeah, good. Just excited. The preseason is kind of starting to wind down. Things are starting to take shape, and just excited for football to be coming back. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, like we're right around the corner from it. Fantasy drafts are in full swing now. Q&As are coming in like crazy. I mean, I've had many people ask me about doing different types of strategies, how to build a par sheet. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, this year, guys, we just started 260 subscribers, over 1,900 views. Or actually, no, over 1,900 hours of views, over 7,000 views total. So can't complain over the amount of views we've had already. So thanks everyone for being subscribers and watching us. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to hear that people are watching and listening to us. So thank you everybody who's been out there watching and listening.
Yeah, we really do appreciate the support. This has been a lot of fun, and we hope that we've been able to help you guys and give you some great advice for all your upcoming auction drafts. So thank you again.
That's right. If you guys need any more help with us, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. Follow me at RyanMiner_FFB. Follow Adam at Always Auctions and Mark at Primetime Mock. Also, don't forget to follow the show at FF Auction Pod. And if you also have any questions and you can't reach us on Twitter because you don't have it, feel free to email us at absoluteauctionpod@gmail.com, which will also be in the title screen down below. So we had a fun, good episode tonight, guys. We know drafts are about pretty much going to start either between this weekend or Labor Day weekend. So tonight we're going to talk about nomination strategies, both early and late. From beginning to middle to end. There's many good ways to do it, and it all really, to me, to be honest, no matter how early you start or how late you start, it's where you're located at in your draft. Adam, what's your favorite spot? Like when you're in the nomination hall and you get to pick your spot, what slot do you like to be in?
Well, it's definitely different than a snake draft because I think with auctions, I think when you first start the auction draft, like your nomination order doesn't impact as much as it does towards kind of the latter part of the draft. I think when the draft kind of is more progresses a little bit more is when your nominations and especially where you are in the order is certainly, I think, kind of takes precedent. But to be honest, I don't really think I have a preference. I don't really think like in a snake draft, there's really any advantages to being, early, middle, or late. I think it really just depends on how you use your nominations in the middle of the draft. Because if you think about it, there's really only two things that you can control in an auction draft. You can really only control your own bidding and who you nominate. Those are really the only two things within your control. So they are important, and I definitely think the nominations become more and more important as the draft goes on.
Mark, any slot particular for you, or are you about the same with Adam?
So I think Adam's right. There's the big advantage. I don't even know if it's a big advantage. It's really a pretty small advantage, especially if you end up filling your roster before it gets to this point. But at the end of the draft, if you are going in linear order, and everybody's down to those $1 bids, everyone can really only spend $1. You're going to go in linear order. So if you're the 14th pick, you're going to get 14th in that scenario. So that's a little bit of an advantage, but the rest of the draft, I don't really mind exactly where I am. I do like being at the beginning. I do like being early on. If I could be the first nomination out of the gate or in the top 5. I like to have an early going where I can throw out a nomination. That can either get me a player that I want, maybe cheaper than I was expecting to get him, or I could put somebody out there that would help sort of define my draft. Because really, I'll just go into my first nomination sort of strategy. At the start of the auction, the market isn't set, right? You have to have a few players come off the board in order for that market to get set. And so you want to take advantage of that early and nominate players that are harder to price when there are no prices, right? Like, so I always look for somebody who's either at the back end of my gold tier in any position group, really, or maybe at the bottom of my platinum tier, so my top, 4 or 5 players of the position, or at the top of my gold tier. So they're a little farther down. They're not the tippy top of that platinum tier. They're at the bottom of the platinum, top of the gold. So they're in that area where maybe, some people value them higher or lower than I do. And I can throw a player out like that early because I know people are going to be saying, say I throw out Lamar Jackson. He's the last player in my platinum tier at quarterback in a super flex league. Say I throw him out while Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts all have not had their prices set. No one else has gone out there. I might get a cheaper price because people might be saving their money for that player. You can do the same thing with wide receivers. I've done it. I did it a few weeks back in one of our mock drafts. I threw out AJ Brown right away at the first overall, and I ended up landing him for like a $36 price, which I think was way below what most people might be willing to pay for him if they knew what the rest of the room would do. So you kind of have to find players that are in that bit of an ambiguous situation. They're probably borderline first round players, but they're not the tippy top. They're not the absolute elite. They're not those first players, the Christian McCaffreys, the players that everyone's going to be throwing out first. They are going to get thrown out. Eventually they will get thrown out and that market will have to be set. But if you don't have the prices for those guys, it makes it a little harder for everybody to want to spend those dollars on somebody that they like just a little bit less. So I'm really looking to find that kind of deal. And honestly, when I'm looking for a player to throw out in that idea, I want it to be somebody who I kind of know my values on. I know exactly that I'm willing to spend them at cost. And then I play the game of, am I going to get a deal? Or is he going to go over the price, and am I going to stick him for a higher price than they might be worth, and that might help me later on. So it kind of works either way, and it allows you kind of not to have to show your hand on how much you like some of those higher tier guys.
And that's why I like to be at the end of when it becomes like picking a slot to go. I like to go like somewhere 11, 12. I like to see what the very first few managers like to do, like. Are they putting out the high bid players? Are they putting out the mid tier players? Are they putting out the low bid players? Like, I kind of like to see like what type of trend they try to do to understand. Like, yeah, like if you get that early nomination out there that top tier guy, everyone's got all their money, and you have that point where people are like, do I really want to spend that much right now, or what? But I kind of want to spend this money on this guy. So then you tend to get deals, like you said, with AJ Brown, or sometimes you overspend, like the one time. With the one draft we did where you were able to get Josh Allen for like $20, and then every other quarterback after that was 13 and under. So
right,
it can benefit you, it can bite you in the end. It all depends on how the draft just flows.
That's true. One thing I will say though is what I like about the early position is it gives you the option to throw out somebody that is hard to price. It's not necessarily seeing how everyone's priced. Seeing how everyone's spending, it's more forcing people to make a decision on a tough to price player when there's no money in the room, and actually going back to that Josh Allen thing, I still think $21 is a great price for Josh Allen on a regular basis. I'm gonna defend myself here. I still think $21 is great, but the price of the room, it did go way down, so comparatively not good, but. In my own, if I were thinking in a vacuum, how did I do on that draft? I would not say I overpaid for Josh Allen.
Right, so yeah, because overall your team still looked good, right?
Yeah, so and that's the other thing. That's why it's a player. I knew how I felt about Josh Allen. I knew I was willing to pay a certain price. Even if the price went lower, I was still going to be okay because I still felt like it was a good price for Allen. Other people, you included, got way better prices later in the draft, and that's fine. But at its core, I still think that Allen was a good player, and that's why I was fine with him kind of at that point when I threw him out first.
Yeah, it was perfect. Adam, I'm gonna kick it over to you. Like when nominating first, like what's one thing you try to do like when setting like the presidents? Like Mark kind of said like what he's trying to do, throw out that big name play tier there out there, big name tier player out there. Jeez, OPs, I can't even talk straight right now. Like
I
what do
mean,
you like? What do you look at doing like during your first nomination?
yeah, I mean, one thing that I might sort of caution people against doing with their first nomination is trying to like sneak through one of your sleepers you think you might be able to get for like $1, because at the start of the draft people are going to be like fired up, they're going to be rearing to go, and it's going to be really tough to try to get an easy steal early on. Now on the flip side, if you play in a league that uses maybe kickers and defenses, try nominating like one of the top kickers or one of the top defensive units really early, like with your first nomination, especially if you're like early on, if you're like one of the first few managers to nominate, and see if you can get one of the other managers to waste like an extra dollar or two that they may not have otherwise have done. I mean, that's a strategy that I like doing, that I've been telling people to do for a long time. If you play in a league that uses kickers and defense, like try to get some of that money that someone wouldn't probably use till later on. Try to get them to burn a couple extra bucks like really early. I mean, that could come back to like really be a huge advantage for you, especially if you get into a bidding war. You're going to have a couple extra dollars that you can get a guy on that this other manager might have used already.
Yeah, and sometimes like a fun way to even do it. Sometimes I'll even do it just because I don't want them. Like I won't usually spend more than $1 or $2 at max on a kicker or a defense. But sometimes I'll just even nominate them at $2 just to force you to say three, Because if I say one, you say two, it's like, well, do I say three? Well, I don't want them for three, but I want you to take them for three instead. So do I say three to get you to say four? It's kind of hard that early on to read the room to understand like how in depth someone's willing to go on that point. So usually like during early nominations is like one thing I like to do is I kind of like to sit back for like the first 3 round of nominations. So, I'm on my third nomination right now. I kind of have a feeling for the room. I can see, what type of like what Mark's trying to do here, what's Adam trying to do here, any other managers are trying to do, and I kind of try to piece it out together. And then another thing I tend to do also at that point is I started to throw out players I want, but at a tier or two down further. So say like I want someone like a Brandon Ayuk, I'll take him, no problem. I'll put him out there. Even though there could be the likes of AJ Brown, who else could be out there? Amon-Ra St. Brown, DK Metcalf, players like that. Like I'll throw the other players I also want just to see if I have opportunity to get them at a affordable price or a cheaper price, or even if I have to spend a little bit more now. I want to get my guy. I'm all about getting my guy if I really want it that bad.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on that, like I think most of the articles that folks see online when they talk about nomination strategies, like 99% of those articles are going to say like nominate the players you don't want, nominate big tier players that you don't want, and that's fine. But I also think that you have to sometimes nominate players that you do want. Like you're trying to tell a story with your nominations, right? Like if you keep nominating players that you don't want, a savvy managers are going to realize, oh, Adam or Mark, they keep nominating these players and they're never bidding on them. Like people are going to pick up on your patterns. So you have to kind of tell a story with your nominations. Yeah, you can nominate players you don't want, but also nominate players you do want and go get those guys. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. Mark, do you feel the same exact way on that? Like, do you prefer to nominate players you want, or do you try to nominate a player or two that you don't want, knowing that people will bid on it?
To be honest, I kind of set it up the same way that I'm setting up my par sheet, which is just like I'm looking at my nucleus, and so the beginning of the draft is all about me finding players that I can fit within my nucleus, and really so I'm not really messing with anyone outside the top 60. I'm not going far back. Like I don't really want to nominate a kicker or a defense in my first 4 or 5 nominations. Just I might do that like when I have no money left, right? But or I have less money, so I could see if somebody else might drain their money on that. Like, but for the most part, I'm trying to look at players that everybody wants. Like the top 60 players are, it doesn't matter where they are at ADP. Everyone can find a room for those players on your team, right? Everyone can find room for those players on your team. So I'm always just looking to find players that are going to fit within my nucleus. I'm going to nominate players kind of based on one, what do I need? Two, will it answer some questions for me? Like, cause that first nomination, market's not set. So you have the market's not set. It could set in a few picks, first 4 or 5 players off the board. It could set well after the first round. For all we know, there could be it could happen any kind of way, and really, so once the market does feel pretty solid and secure, I'm just focusing on finding players to throw on my nucleus. Maybe it's the last player in a tier. Maybe it's if I have receivers, I might throw receivers in the same tier out to see if other people will go for them and the prices will come down. So then I have a little bit more leverage through that through those early parts of my nucleus. But for the most part, it's all players I would have on my team. They're all players I'd want to have on my team. And it's really all about the price. That's why knowing your values early is so important, because the good thing about auction drafting is if you're keeping your cards close to your vest, it makes it a lot easier for you to find players at good deals because nobody really knows what you're doing. And so after that market is set, I'm really looking for players that just like answer questions, whether I earn the player or not, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so maybe there are only a certain number of people in my hero running back strategy that I'm willing to have as my hero running back, right? 6, 7 running backs, whatever it ends up being. Until all those guys are gone, I'm going to keep nominating them just so I have the answer. Maybe I want an elite tight end, but I'm only going to get them at price. I'll throw out the elite tight ends, see what people go for them. If their prices go too high, I'll know I'm probably out. If they go low, I'll probably land one of them. Same thing with quarterbacks. All those different things that change the nucleus of your team, I'm looking for those answers. And once most of those answers are found, there's going to be, the market is much more well set. You'll see what people are and are not paying for. And then you can continue to attack and find that lower level of your nucleus. And that's kind of how I'm going, really. Like, I'd rather focus on my team. I'm not saying that I won't throw out a player that might drain some money, but it doesn't mean that I'd ever be out on them necessarily. So early in the nominations, they're all going to be players I like. It's just at a different, whatever price point. And really, I'm just looking for answers of what is my nucleus going to look like based on what this market is doing.
Exactly. And like a lot of people might think too, they might get a steal or a deal because, they see these big names coming off, you're like your Christian McCaffreys, your Josh Allen, they're all coming off the board. And then they see that one guy that's still there, because no one's nominating them yet. And then next thing you know, like, oh man, I'm going to nominate him because I can get a steal on him right now. And then you nominate that player and then everyone's in on him. It's like, you didn't exactly get that steal like early in the bidding because someone waited long enough. It's like when there's too much money out there on the table, everyone's going to bet on that player. So don't ever think you're ever going to get the deal of a lifetime on these players. It's you're going to save a few bucks here and there. It's not going to be you're going to get them for you're not going to get a $30 player for like $10 is what I'm trying to say. Right. So the early nomination side of it is how much fun do you want to have with it? Do you want to nominate all the studs right off the bat? Do you want to nominate, a couple tiers down below? It's all depending on how you want to look at your team and how you want to build it. Because just even those early nominations can be enough to kind of get some money out there spending. Like Adam said, like he'll like to nominate kickers and defenses early. So yeah, you'll make someone spend $2 or $4 more than they should have. But at the end of the night, or the end of the draft, that's $2 or $3 more in your pocket that you're willing to spend that they can't. Which brings me to my next point of the draft's going smoothly. We're having a great time. You're looking at everyone's teams being built. We're at the midpoint of the draft, where people have most of the running backs, most of the wide receivers. Most of the teams are looking complete besides their benches. When you look at the midterm, do you still look to fill your needs or do you look to more go towards what other teams might be willing to need just to try to get the money out. Adam, I'm gonna kick this one over to you right now.
Yeah, I think during the middle of the draft, it is, like I said before, you need to kind of mix your nominations up a little bit. Because again, you are trying to tell a story. You're trying to tell people who you want and trying to fool people on who you don't want. So I think it is important to kind of nominate players you do want and nominate players that you don't, and try to name and try to drain a little bit of the money out of the board. And kind of going back a little bit to what Mark said, nominations are really all about like setting the tone of how the draft is going to how the draft is going to play out. And I like to, and you can do this whether it's early on, in the middle of the draft. I like to get a read on my room and how aggressive or how conservative my league mates are with their spending, and observing bidding, no matter if it's early on or as the draft progresses, it can really clue you in on how much people are willing to spend relative to their budgets, and it'll allow you to adjust your own strategy accordingly.
Yeah, no, I exactly the same way. Like I'll look at my team and I'll see where I'm at. I could have 3 players, I could have 5 players, but I'm looking at see what everyone else already has player wise and money wise. Like the money wise side of it is what blows my mind, because people think, like, oh man, he's not going to bid on him. He doesn't need him. He's got a full lineup already. He's just filling his bench. That doesn't mean people are not going to build depth at that point. And we got to realize that not every team's going to be built the same. Some teams might build studs and duds. Some team might build a completely balanced. Some people, have different type of strategies they're going to go into. At the end of the day, they all work in some way, shape, or form. It's just trying to figure out that nomination strategy of, if I want player A, like we'll just say like Najee Harris off the bat, just because it seems like an easy one I always like to go back to. And I want him as my RB3, but I see another guy who doesn't have an RB2. I look at that and I go, okay, you know what? I'm going to nominate this next running back. We'll say like DeAndre Swift, and maybe I'll see if he can get bid on him. So I try to like bid off to see if I could do something to get them to get that other running back instead, while I still have the other running back I'm looking to get. And if I don't have the chance to nominate him and someone else nominates him, well, then I'll see what I can do. But, just like my par sheet, I'm looking at it. I'll say, okay, yeah, I'll bid on him. No, I won't bid any more than this on him. Mark, how do you tend to handle your mid nominations, like when you're going through it?
Yeah, so most of my money's already gone at this point, I'd say, on a normal basis. And again, once I have a pretty good feeling on the prices of my nucleus, I'm willing to get out and just wait for a while. I think sometimes I actually kind of like that little bit of a break in the draft. And it allows me to kind of regroup and rethink for a minute. I know at that point, so again, when you're talking about my nucleus, I'm looking at like 60 to 75% was allocated, and then the rest from there, my top player that goes next might be somewhere between $14, $12, $10, something like that. So I have a lot of there's going to be a lot of players that are left that I want that are going to go for more than those prices. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to push all those guys out. I'm going to make sure all those guys are getting their money spent on. And maybe I'm trying to save a few. Honestly, I'm not going to be picky on who it is. I'm going to be picky about what tier they are. So if I'm going to be picky on, like, okay, I'm going to save a few, wide receiver 3s that are still in my gold tier. I'm going to see if I can throw at everybody else in all the other positions before them, so I can maybe get that. Or, maybe it's my running back 2, or maybe it's my first running back because I went 0 RB for all I know. So really pushing guys out that are like against my agenda, really, and seeing if I could get them for under that like $10 range where most of my bids are going to have to come at this point. So doing that, seeing if I can land a deal in any of those, fine, I'm happy to take that. But also just waiting patiently, taking everybody else's dollars away, understanding that I need my money. Now is the time where maybe I might throw out a kicker in defense, for $1 or $2, and know that like it saves me a roster spot. I know I landed a kicker for $1. I know I landed a defense for $1. so I can allocate any money that I had, which is usually nothing, back into my roster. But really, like, that kind of thing helps. It helps you fill those roster spots. It makes you know, okay, now I have 2 less roster spots on me. I have all this money left allocated. It might bring your little sleeper auto dollar or whatever it is up another dollar each time you do that too. So that's kind of nice. So doing that until you can, one, get to the point of the draft where there's still good players left that you can use those dollars that you saved or that I've waited on, and then just getting yourself to a point where you're either at or above everybody else in the room, so you can have the leverage again, and then you can start taking advantage of like those last few players left.
And don't forget too, like, this is a time in the mid nominations where you're going to see deals and you want to bid on them, but you just can't. Like, you just have to let it go. Like, you can't be like, oh man, I can't let him go for that cheap, because next thing you know, you're getting dumped to this player, and then you're allocating no money left for yourself, and then you're trying to fill a bench spot with dollar players when you should have a dollar, maybe $2, $3, $4 left per player if you can do that, to try to balance it out. That way you're not putting yourself in this hole. So don't get yourself in a bidding war at this point, because this is where I feel like the most important part of your draft could be, is you're starting to bid so much that next thing you know, you're like Mark was throwing that name out there and you're bidding on him, you want him. Next, he throws, someone throws that next big name out there, you bid on him, you want him. Next thing you know, your money's drained. And then you're sitting there the rest of the draft going, man, I wish I didn't do this. I wish I didn't do that. Oh man, I could have had that guy instead of this guy. We start hemming and hawing. That's when you need to kind of sit back, like Mark says. Sit back. He already spent a lot of his money up front in his nucleus. He's starting to throw the other names out there. Get that money spent out there, and just kind of just go with the flow. Like, you have to let it go.
Right. That's why I do my whole thing in phases. I go with my nucleus, and then I go with all my flex considerations. It might be 2 or 3 into my bench, but it's everyone who's in those last 3 starters, those first 3 bench, that kind of area is that middle section, and then I have my $1, $2 player tier that's sort of at the bottom. Honestly, working in those different phases allows you to sort of just think a little more clearly. And again, like, I'm not saying it's a race to get your nucleus filled. Fill it as the draft allows you to, as you are naturally kind of fit to do it. There are going to be times where you need to be aggressive. There are going to be times where you can just wait it out. It really depends on the feel of the room. You have to sort of, again, know your league, know your drafters, and but once you get your nucleus filled, that allows you to sort of focus to your next section, which is your flex considerations, right? You go into your flex considerations. They become where you spend the rest of that, good chunk of your, what I would say is like 30% of your budget left, maybe, if you're doing that 60, 75-ish range, somewhere between 25, 35%, something like that. And then again, after that, I'm going $1, $2 players, and I have my list of guys that I want to start the bidding at 2, and if I don't get them, I don't get them, and then start the bidding at 1.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, we hit that in the late part of the nominations where it's just like $1, 2 players are coming through. And I'm gonna kick this over to you. Like, when you're going late, like, how do you feel about doing that? Like, do you like look at that team that you see that has all the money and say, like, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and do this late guy because I know he's got all this money, and I'm gonna try to push him to spend it all? Or do you kind of just say, well, it sucks to be you?
I actually think that as the draft progresses, your nominations actually become more important than they were super early on. And I think you'll definitely notice like a gradual dynamic shift as the draft moves along. Things are going to be slowing down. Like Mark said, you want to take a break, you want to relax a little bit, breathe. Late in the draft, most teams have limited budgets and specific needs. So the strategy that you're going to employ will probably change. Hopefully you saved a little bit of your budget for late in the draft, and you'll be able to get some potential, breakout players or depth pieces at a really nice discount, meaning that you can sneak in valuable players, on the cheap. And I like to try to save about right around 10% of my budget once I have my core group of players. And I like to use that last 10% to really bully and outbid other managers for late round players that I'm bullish on. Think of it kind of like a poker game. You can use your larger stack to re-raise other players out of the pot and get those late round guys, those sleepers that you've had your eye on. You can use that remaining budget to really push the other managers around and get those guys. That's what I like to do late in the draft.
Yeah, I always like to like put out that sleeper list. People say that this guy's a sleeper, but it's like if I know it's a sleeper, Adam knows it's a sleeper, Mark knows it's a sleeper. Is it really a sleeper? No. So I like to get that guy out there. Someone like a Kendra Miller. Like everyone loves Kendra Miller, but is he really going to supplant Alvin Kamara? I don't think so this year. But if someone spends $4 or $5 on him, I'm like, this is great because I would spend no more than maybe $2 on him. But hey, if I get someone to spend $4 or $5 because they didn't allocate their budget correctly, then it's well worth it. Like this is the part like of the draft where I like to look at what people's budgets are, because if you didn't spend it all up front, you're going to start spending it all here on the back end. So if I know that you have, let's say your max bid's $20 and you only have 4 more slots left to fill, I'm going to put that player out there that I know that no matter what, I have my max bid $7. I know you're going to bid 8 just because you're trying to allocate that money out on there. Mark, how do you feel about doing that on late nominations? Like, do you do the same thing, like looking at people's budget strategies, or do you kind of just nominate guys and then leave us hanging like that? But okay, he just Mark just fell off the
sailed off the edge of the earth.
Yeah, it fell off the stream. But like, I'll just kick back. We'll go back and forth on this one, Adam. Like,
yeah,
do you look at it like that? Like, because I like to look at it. Everyone's budget, and I'll say like, I have the most money to spend right now. I know for a fact I can get player X, no matter what, because no one's gonna be able to outbid me on it. But if I know like if someone has all these wide receivers and their running backs aren't that strong, I'm gonna look at that max bid that buyer or that potential buyer could have, and I'm gonna put that bid out there on that player that I know is a good like running back, say like a good running back 3, good running back 4, someone that's everyone's high on. Seeing that he can spend that $8, $9, $10, knowing that my max bid is only going to be $7, like I haven't like they're like I need this guy because I had to fill that roster spot. Like I can't go into my week 1 without this running back. Do you feel that way, or do you kind of just let it go?
Well, there's and maybe I'm forgetting one thing, but it seems to me that in auctions there's really only like 3 finite things that you have available. You've got your budget, you've got your nominations, and you've got your roster spots. Like those are finite. So I don't think that there's something that you can just like be really kind of willy-nilly with. But one of the things that I will say, and I think this is like a cardinal sin of auction drafting, maybe like the cardinal sin of auction drafting, is at the end of the draft, like if you have more than like $1 or $2 even like left over in your bank, like that's a big no-no. Like you want to spend your money. Like don't leave money on the table, because I don't think most leagues like let you roll over your extra bankroll into like your fob or whatever. So like spend your money, but like spend it wisely. Don't just spend it because you have it. But yeah, like bully the other managers. Use your money to like push them off players, and that's the thing. Like you got to keep track of other managers' budgets. Like never take your eyes off what their what their budgets are, because you're going to be battling with these people. Like you always got to be mindful of not just what your budget is, but the other managers' budgets are as well.
Exactly. All right, Mark, that's the original question I was going to ask you before you left the stream.
No, that's okay. So no, my strategy is actually kind of different. I do not want money at the end now. I think in general, like I said, my thought is like 5. I'm thinking 5, 6, 5 if I'm looking at a 16 roster construction. So 5 or 6 in my nucleus, and then either 6 or 5 if I have a 6-person nucleus, and then 5 for my last 5. So my last 5 on my bench, I'm looking at a 2-2-1-1-1 kind of pricing.
that is my goal. Now, there are going to be times where I have a little more than that, and I spend a little, I'll spend a few extra dollars on that budget, but I really actually don't. In general, I feel like I have a lot of sleepers, and I'm not trying to say that to be like, but in general, there are a lot of guys in the later rounds that I like, and I'm just willing to forego like having my preference later in the draft if somebody has extra money, because if somebody has that extra money to spend on a sleeper, I actually think that means that they didn't use that money on somebody better earlier, really, right? Like, I think the reason they're at the bottom there is potential in these sleepers. There absolutely is. But we're also saying there are lottery tickets. So do I want to buy a $25 lottery ticket, or do I want to buy a $5 lottery ticket? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of my thought. Like, I don't mind being the one who buys the dollar scratcher, the $2 scratcher, as opposed to buying the $5 scratcher because I have that extra money allocated. I'd rather make sure it's pushed up into my nucleus, so I have a strong nucleus. I want to make sure that I have, again, I've tried to make sure that I have enough money to go after the players I want that are going to be my flex considerations in my bench. And then I know those bottom 5 are probably the most likely to be first one off, cut on the waiver wire. So I'm really willing to only spend, like between those 5 at most $10 total. And I'm really shooting to have that low budget in those last 5 picks, because if not, it probably means that I didn't use those extra dollars to get maybe a better tier player that I could have had, earlier in the draft.
So at the end of the night, the main cause is spend your money wisely, spend it correctly. Don't hold out, think you're going to get a deal. Like, oh man, if I hold this, $20 extra, I'm going to get this deal. Guess what? You're not.
Right.
Let's
and
move on from that.
Right. And I'm not saying like every team should be going stars and scrubs. Like, that's not necessarily what I'm saying. But I do think, there is opportunity cost with all this. So naturally, all of your money really should be pushed up to the top of your draft. And it's an exponential drop that comes with the later, like the value of later picks in fantasy versus the value of earlier picks. So if you're not spending a good portion of that money on the early part of your draft, I would say like it's hard for me to want to have like more than $20 or $30 on those picks that, again, are players that we're hoping crack a lineup. We're hoping they work out. And we also understand that if they don't work out early, we're probably cutting them for somebody else. So I'm just playing the dollars and cents game, that if those guys are going to be volatile, I'm going to spend the least amount of money on them.
Exactly, because like at this point in the draft, you're hoping for the best, and you're looking at your team saying, "All right, this guy, I don't care if I have to drop him." You don't win the draft. There's no such thing. You don't win your league in the draft. You win your league throughout the waiver wire, through trades, through the whole season. Hopefully not being injured. I mean, look at your one team, Mark. You said you have Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams. They were late round picks or waiver wire pickups. So what's that tell you?
Right.
So if you like you said, you spend to the top, and you build for all your sleepers after that, what are you really losing? And to be honest, you're not really losing anything. You're actually gaining, because now you're not like, man, I'm dropping this $7 player because I overspent on him because I had all this extra money. Where if you say, well, I'm just dropping this $1 or $2 player for this guy, it's no big deal because it's $2. I didn't really lose any money.
Right. And there are instances where you probably should have a little bit more. Like, again, if you have a really deep league and you want depth, on your bench, you might need to save a few extra dollars. But even still, I think for the most part, that just means those later round picks are probably even less viable. So for me, it's just, I'm not saying like don't blow your budget as fast as you can. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying like know the values of like the time in the draft. Again, like that's why my top 5 is 60 to 75%. My middle 6 or 5 is 25 to 30%. And then I'm looking at sub 5% for the back end. And it's just kind of a numbers game that I'm trying to play, like knowing that, I'm trying to match my my prices to my opportunity cost, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, excuse me. And as we wrap this up, Adam, you got any last words on late nominations before we move on?
No, I mean, I don't really think there's necessarily like a right or wrong way to do it. I mean, every auction draft is going to be different. All the managers are going to be different. I might prefer to save a little bit more for my, bench players than Mark might, but I completely understand where he's coming from. Like your core group of players are going to be your core group of players. Like they're the ones you probably are going to spend the most amount of money on. But I also think that in every auction draft, there are guys that will just, for whatever reason, tumble down the draft board and they just never get nominated. And there are still really good players available that you can spend, a couple extra dollars on that you may not have been able to get if you would have not had a little bit more budget towards the end of your draft. I mean, I did a draft the other day and I was able to get Brian Thomas Jr., I think for $3, and I was able to get him because I saved a couple extra dollars more than all the other managers. And I was like, dang, I'll take that, and I had the extra money to spend, and I thought it ended up working out really nicely.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, I was just going to say, like, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think it's just, it really depends on how the draft plays out. But yeah, you probably should be spending the majority of your money on your core group of players, your nucleus, as Mark calls it. I just like to have a little bit money, couple extra dollars left over towards the end. So if there are those guys that do take a tumble down the draft board, I can have that extra money to kind of bully the other managers and make sure that I get those guys.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I think you should have that. I just try to, what I try to do strategically is I try to still make sure that I have as much money as I can. So that happens again, sort of in my flex, like where my roster build is, that's still within my flex considerations that I try to hold that timing with my nominations a little longer. And then by the time we get to the end, I can just have those last couple nominations. But you're absolutely right, Adam. There, I mean, like that's going to be there for certain people. It's going to depend on how many. I think it's going to depend on how many people are willing to spend more money at the top of the draft, and how many more people are willing to hold on to their money at the end of the draft. It's going to, both can be viable options. It's going to depend on how the draft room all shakes out.
Yeah, and to wrap it up, I like to say, like, learn your draft room as the draft's going. Like, if you follow along from beginning to end, it should be pretty much the same with this person. Like, this person you'll see could be easy spender. He spends all of his money. He's sitting there the rest of the draft. You have the other guy who's, I always like to call like the sniper, super quiet and only comes out when they want to, because they're looking to get that guy. So as soon as you see them start bidding on that guy, you can kind of say like, all right, I know what he wants, so let's see how much more I can get out of him. So read the room, learn the room, understand the room, see what's going on around you, see like how much your own budget is. Like, just don't get caught up in these traps. Some people will try to get you out in this trap and then just go ahead and just kind of sit back and be like, you know what? Nope, I'm not going to spend any more than this. This is it. I'll do $1 more. But after that, if he goes $1 more, then that's theirs. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up here tonight. We got some questions for the night. Adam, I'm going to kick this one off to you, the very first one, because this is like one of my favorite types of things where people like to ask about strategies. And this one comes from our good friend, Ryan Fisher. And he asks, what's the best team strategy for winning this year? Studs and duds, overall balance. How about best roster build? Is it best to go hero RB, zero wide receiver, etc.? What builds are good to go with?
Yeah, and I think anyone that's been sort of following me on Twitter or following our show will know that I've been screaming zero RB from the rooftop since we started. And like we said earlier on, like there's all these strategies are viable. Like there's no wrong way to build your roster. And if you play in multiple leagues, like try them all, like give them all a shot. Like what do it's supposed to be fun. Try a team that you're doing more studs and duds, and try one that's a little bit more balanced. Try one that's zero RB. See how you like it. I mean, I personally feel that like the studs and duds build leaves you with a little lacking for depth. But it can be a powerful team. But if one of your studs has a down year or gets injured, that lack of depth could really end up costing you. But if all your guys hit, you're gonna like just blow away your league. So try them all. I prefer to be a little bit more balanced with my roster. Like I said, I've been preaching zero RB all year, especially in full PPR leagues. I really like hammering my wide receivers and putting a big chunk of my budget there. And I think by focusing on wide receivers, you also tend to avoid the volatility and injury risk that are kind of associated with running backs. I mean, running backs just get injured more than wide receivers do. It's just a fact of football. But and like I said, I think that if you go zero RB, just make sure you leave yourself a little bit of money later on in the draft, and target those value RBs later on towards the end of the draft.
No, exactly, Adam. You hit the nail on the head. That one, like the best team strategy is all strategies work. But to be honest with you, like if you're gonna go like studs and duds, I feel like there should be like maybe a 12 team at worst, 10 teams and under for sure. I'll go studs and duds. I'll build that type of strategy right there. Like I'll spend all my money on my top guys because I want the top guys, knowing that there's only 9 other teams or 7 other teams that can actually do that. And then for the roster builds, and you guys see my roster builds many times. I've seen your guys how you go. My roster build kind of just falls to me, like as how I like to say it. And what I mean by that is sometimes it looks like a hero RB. I mean, we found out the other day I did mid RB, and I actually liked how that team looked out, because I was spending more on wide receiver. The whole zero wide receiver, I still can't get over that part yet because I just don't see it unless it's like a touchdown only league and I'm heavily like favorite running backs. But outside of that, I can't do it. But every strategy works. And like we said before, it's all about how you play the waiver wire and how you do trades. All right, and then we got one more. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
No. I was just saying, it's all going to come down to your preference for the most part. And based on the nomination strategies I kind of put out there, the way you want to nominate is answer the questions, about the get people to answer questions for you about the draft room, whether it's you landing a player or somebody else landing a player and seeing those prices in the market. You can answer questions about what your nucleus is going to look like, and that's going to tell you about your build, because really, like, your nucleus is going to define your build. If you have a tight end, an early tight end in that nucleus, that's a huge defining factor. If you have a Christian McCaffrey, that's a huge defining factor. Or like Josh Allen, that's a huge defining factor, because not everyone can get an elite quarterback or an elite tight end or Christian McCaffrey. So having those answers helps you decide what the best path is for you to sort of take.
All right, Mark, which brings us to our last question, and it basically almost kind of kicked it off in a way. So from Matthew Moret, he says, do you set a cost expectation you spend on each position of your roster, or do you just simply have players tiered, as how you say how your nucleus is tiered between your platinum, your gold, everything in between, and take value at, say, wide receiver 3 instead of attacking the wide receiver position of an auction?
So yeah, I mean, I have all my players tiered and priced. That's basically how I define it. And we've talked about it before. If you want to get at me about how to audit your league and audit your values, find me on Twitter at Primetime Mock. I'm happy to help you out. But really, my set is I'm looking at my nucleus. I'm looking at my dollar values for those first 5 or so players. So again, like if you look at 70%, that's $44, $36, $28, $20, $12. I know that those are approximately where I want to spend on each of my first 5 players. Doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you have to take a little more at the top and give a little back at the back end. That's fine, but you just have a decent ballpark of what those numbers look like. You can also, again, like I have right here just what 65% looks like, what 70% looks like, what 75% looks like, and so on, right? So I see what it's shaping out, what target I'm looking like I'm going to hit. If I'm looking like I'm going to hit towards 75% of my budget, I might try and back off on the back couple players to maybe bring myself back down to earth a little bit. But it has nothing really for me to do with the position. The position, the price is going to dictate where I jump, basically. If one of my hero RB candidates is going too low, sure, I'll jump on him. Like last week we had Jahmyr Gibbs fall to $27. And at the time I was also scared about Jahmyr Gibbs and the hamstring injury. Seems like he might be back for week 1. Seems like he might be okay. Still a little nervous, but I'd probably say $27 is way too cheap for us to let Jahmyr Gibbs go last week. So if that price falls to, okay, I've got a hero RB build. I can do that. Same thing with quarterbacks. If you nominate Josh Allen and he goes for $20, okay, great. I know I'm going to have an elite quarterback in my build. And then you just keep answering those questions till your nucleus is filled out. And then you go into the next section saying, okay, I've got my nucleus. I know it's quarterback. It's an elite quarterback, an elite tight end, and 2 receivers or 3 receivers and no running back. So I know in the next 6 picks, got to probably get 3 or 4 running backs that can help me platoon my team and a couple flex considerations, and you just sort of build that way. I think that's an easier way to build the puzzle. I understand why some might say, this is the target I want to spend for my RB1 and my RB2 or my running back room as a whole. But I also think that sort of puts you in a box of saying like, okay, if I don't meet that criteria, I've either failed or I can't fix it. But if you're saying, okay, I kind of know where I want to value my players, you hit above or below that number and you kind of just see what the market is doing, then you can kind of build a little more ambiguously. It allows you to hold your cards close to your vest so people don't know what you're doing as easily. And you're still going to come out with a pretty good team most of the time.
Adam, any final thoughts on that?
I think that was great.
Right? I'm like,
Nothing
man,
bad.
I can't top that off. It's like Mark just audited all of us right now.
If you want help auditing your league, get at me. Just DM me. I'm pretty open. So get at me.
All right, guys, and we're gonna be go ahead and wrapping this up. And next week will be our last episode for the season, guys. So coming to an end here as the summer comes to an end as we wrap up draft season. But next week we'll be touching back on AAV, overvalued, undervalued, or priced just right. So we're gonna have some fun next week with that one because that seems to be one of our favorite episodes as we did it last month, and that was a lot of fun. So looking forward to doing that one.
I like it.
All right, guys. So for Adam, for Mark, I'm Ryan. This is the Absolute Auction Podcast. We'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks for watching.
See ya.